Dr. Jazz. Dr. Jazz.
When I saw you guys like in Ljubljana 25 years ago,
Yeah,
I
a
mean,
long time ago.
very long on the TV show, if you remember, with Scott and with
Yeah.
two Scotts and Kirk, and man, that gig I think changed my
Oh.
life. You know, really, I was like, man, what is this? And
Yeah, crazy
started-
stuff. I don't know if I remember correctly. We had to like get up at 7 o'clock in the morning to record that or something. It was like
Oh no, that was the evening show.
but it was live then.
Yeah, with the audience,
Okay.
like
Maybe we had to do a rehearsal or something. I don't know.
maybe, yeah. But that was such a cool show because, you know, I was like 5 meters away from you guys, and it's just like I love that. And but I wanted to ask you this: like, I listened to Gargoyle Borlai's latest record, The
Mhm.
Missing Song. Can you play on one tune, Kirk, which I guess
Yeah.
is for Kirk Covington?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, with Scott Kinsey also. And I wanted to ask you, how does your story with Gargoyle begin? Actually, I mean, I know he played like on Retro and Larger
Mhm.
Than Life, and he's like this monster new drummer you
Yeah.
play with. But where do you meet them?
Well,
When did you guys meet?
how that happened was, let's see, I'd met him a few times when I'd been to Hungary, and he found out that Kinsey was going to be in Europe, so he booked a gig.
Ah,
He booked a trio gig at one of the clubs there in Budapest. So I flew up and did it, and immediately it's like, hey, something's going on here, you know? So that was like in the fall, maybe in October or something like that. So the next opportunity for us to be together was when I was going to LA for the NAMM show. I think that was like 2010. So I booked an extra few days to stick around LA, and Kinsey had a studio, and the three of us went in the studio and just kind of jammed.
oh,
You know.
okay.
I brought some ideas. A lot of it was just jamming, and unfortunately, that started a process that took like 5 years. You know, because because of a lot of things, partly because of distance. You know, because we're all separated. But that's how we got started. You know, we got started working together, and then in 2011 he moved to Barcelona.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
And so as soon as he arrived, I booked time in the studio. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I said we got to go do something.
Yeah.
So let me close this.
Cool.
And so we recorded in 1 month time. We recorded Retro. Actually, it was like 2 days recording, and then 2 weeks later, we went back in the studio, just me and him duo,
Oh, wow.
and just improvised for like a day and a half, and that became the chunk of Larger Than Life.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, wow, super. Yeah, because you guys sound. I mean, you know, you sound tight with any drummer you play, but with Gargoyle especially, it's like, you know, you have this groove going on. I don't know what it is, but
yeah,
hard
it's one of those hard to define things that we kind of share. We share an imagination, maybe, but we also share an openness to each other's suggestions when we play. So
yeah,
it's fun.
yeah. You know, I checked some of the records I have you on, and you know, you played with Gargoyle, then it's like, you know, Dennis Chambers, Kirk Covington, Peter Erskine. I'm probably tons of other amazing drummers, and you always sound amazing with them. But I wanted to ask you, how does it change for you as a bass player? Let's say playing with Peter Erskine than with Dennis Chambers. It's, you know, both are monsters on drums, but like totally different concept. So how do you change your playing if you do? I mean, of course, it's different musicality. Like with Peter, you did other stuff, but like still.
Well, it's like kind of totally different situations require different kinds of playing. Like the record that I did for Joe DiOrio and Robin
Yeah,
Ford
I love that one.
um, was kind of a little more jazz
Yeah,
leaning toward jazz trying to be fusion, instead of just, crazy stuff that I get into with Gergo and Kirk and shit like that. Um, I don't really I don't change my mindset,
yeah,
you
okay.
know. Um, and of course we had a chance to work out, in rehearsal some of those tunes, and I understood the direction and adapted, a little
Yeah,
bit, not too much, but some,
yeah.
you know.
How did the record happen, by the way, with those guys, Minor Elegance? I mean, like, so what? That tune, it's amazing, and it's like, how you do it, like, it's so cool, and swank
Um,
things, or what it's called, I think it's really cool. So, like, it
how
starts.
30 years ago now?
Yeah, I think it's 1990. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, more. Um, I honestly don't remember. I'd done some playing with Robin.
Oh, really?
Um,
Oh, wow.
yeah, because I subbed on some gigs that he was doing. We did a short tour of like Europe and a
Oh,
few
wow.
things around LA. And so I'd done some playing with him, and I think he hooked up, and Joe wanted to do a record, so I was introduced through Robin. Um, and I was real excited to learn that Peter was on the gig,
Yeah.
and I remember having to shed this. There's one melody that Joe wrote on a blues that was like ungodly. So yeah, I was just trying to keep up on that gig.
Did you ever play with Peter before?
Um, Before that moment, no, no.
I mean, you knew, of course, the weather
Course,
report stuff and everything. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's so
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. I have to ask you a little. There's like when you played with him, let's say, for instance, did you ever talk about like the weather report years with him, or do you ever ask musicians, like, if like older musicians, for instance, about stuff what they did or something like that?
Um, well, I was, I think I was tempted to, but I didn't like want to be a pest,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I know what
Um,
you mean. Okay.
Super tempting,
For
Um,
me too. I always regret this. You're on a tour for 14 days, and you play with someone who's done stuff in, I don't know,
Right.
mid
Yeah.
70s, and I'm like, man, but how was it with, what did you, and then,
Well, the thing is, it was a work situation. We had to
yeah,
rehearse. We had limited
sure.
time, and there wasn't enough hanging out to
Yeah.
become a fanboy. You know.
Yeah, 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 sure. But speaking of 70s, I wanted to ask you this, like, uh, Peter Erskine, that those guys started like really earlier already, mid 70s, I guess, or even earlier. He did with
Mhm.
Stan, yeah, even earlier.
Yeah.
And what were like your first records, like, speaking of jazz strictly, that
Mhm.
blew your mind in the 70s? You remember, like,
Um, well, let's see. Starting in 1970, let's see, I was 13. Um, I think that was the year that I started like turning the dial on my parents' radio stations
okay, that's cool.
and seeking out something else. So I wasn't really that plugged into even popular music, because all they listened to was country and some gospel. So, um, I started discovering things with friends, and I think the first attraction was the Jazz Crusaders,
Oh yeah, okay.
because I heard them on the radio, and I found them in the record bin at the store. And when I found them, like there was all this other
Yeah,
instrument in the jazz section, and there was all this other stuff to explore. So I've kind of entered, instrumental jazz through the Crusaders,
oh, oh.
and then I worked my way backwards back to the old bebop, and then learned my way up through Weather Report and stuff like that. So it was kind of a reverse journey, you know.
But you played guitar then, right? In the beginning.
Yeah, I was playing. Actually, I got a bass when I was in 1970. I got a bass,
Okay.
and when I turned 15, I got a guitar.
Wow. Okay.
So in most situations, I would try to play guitar, but there would be too many, and so I would play
As
bass.
always, yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, you mentioned going back to Parker and those guys. Like, did you then also like on guitar or bass? I mean, like transcribe the melodies and like learn the heads and stuff. How was your process there? Like learning that
Um,
stuff. I mean,
yeah, that stuff, because I was around jazz musicians at jazz schools,
yeah.
that was stuff was held up to me as stuff that I should aspire to. But I wasn't very good at it.
Hmm.
Um, let's see. There was one time, like there was one time where, like I was at North Texas State and they
Yeah.
didn't have bass instruction. I think they still don't. But I could, if I declared a jazz education major, that would allow me to be in the ensembles and the jazz classes and stuff like that. So I was in a jazz class and improvisation class, and they said, okay, transcribe something, and so I transcribed some George Benson. And it
Really?
was like,
Oh wow,
yeah,
that's
yeah, it was the first time in my life because I wasn't that. I mean, I didn't go to North Texas State until maybe 2.5, 3 years after high school because I was so intimidated with the process of written music and
yeah,
and
yeah.
and I mean, I was so bad. I mean, I was in this music history class, and they would play music, and we were supposed to watch the manuscript, and I would just look, and when everybody turned the page, I would turn the page.
So
I had
cool.
like we had a let's see, I had to have an applied at another college. I had to have an applied on or big group,
Yeah.
which is the orchestra or the marching band. So they put me in the orchestra, and the director didn't trust me to even like bang a cymbal on bar 147. So my job in the orchestra was to go there like 10 or 15 minutes before and set up all the stands and chairs, and that
Oh
was it.
man. Wow.
That was my orchestra credit.
Wow.
That was,
Okay.
that was bad.
Check passed.
Yeah, yeah.
But when did you then learn to read all the? When was that period? I mean, because quite soon then you moved to LA, right? But
Yeah.
before that, I guess, when did the shedding start? Like, learning to read the charts and getting lead
Well,
sheets and
um, I would say I got I made the most improvement in my reading the first like 6 months in LA because
oh really? Oh wow.
before that, I mean, I could figure out music. I could learn it quickly. My ear was always way ahead of my brain as far as figuring things out. Um, and so I never got really that good at sight reading. But I could read charts and chords and a few rhythms. So it was held up to me, at that time in the early 80s that all before that, move to LA, there's lots of studio work. If you get good at your reading and
Yeah.
you know the right people, you can, make a living in the studio. And so I was like beating myself up for like, oh man, I should really get my reading shit together. And the thing is I had nothing but time because I knew two people that I went to school with that lived in LA, and they were both on the road. So
Oh
I was
shit.
literally calling up people saying, "Hello, my name is Gary Willis. I play bass." You know,
Oh
uh,
man. Wow.
it wasn't until maybe my second year there that I made the big really, to me it was a risk, but
Yeah.
I bought an answering machine. You know. As foreign a concept as that is to people here, that was like a big investment in my future, because you go out for groceries, you wonder if you're
Yeah.
going to miss
Sure.
a, it's like, so, so yeah, so in that 6 months, I really did work on getting my reading better. But all through that time, in college and afterwards, I was working, you
Yeah.
know, working on playing, working on my technique, working on whatever I could, you know.
Yeah. But you played like already gigs in Texas, like jazz
I
gigs
was,
and fusion gigs
yeah,
all the time, right? Probably. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, all
like,
the time. Like.
yeah, I was doing whatever gigs I could
Yeah.
while I was in college, and then I basically left college. I didn't get a degree because if I would have gone for the degree, I would have to stick around for like another 2.5 years studying classical
Oh
upright,
yeah, sure.
which, I first of all I sucked at, and it was not going to be my future, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So I moved to Dallas, and for about a year and a half in Dallas, I played around there in the fusion scene and was with this really good band that Kirk was in.
Oh, okay. That's how you guys met. Okay.
Yeah. Well, we met at school at North Texas. He lived above me at one point,
Oh,
in this
wow.
house.
Amazing.
And so I did as much as I could there, although I didn't really break into the studio scene there.
Yeah.
I I did as much as I could playing live there, and we were pretty popular. Blah 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 blah. And then the opportunity to move to LA came up, and so I knew bands were not being put together for touring from Dallas,
Yeah,
and
yeah, sure.
it was like New York or LA, and the first opportunity that came up was LA. So
Yeah. But
yeah,
like your idea was when moving to LA, when you check I don't know, the discography of some musicians, let's say, I don't know, Vinny Colaiuta, right? He probably did
yeah,
like 11 records per day in the beginning
yeah.
of early years. I mean, that was your idea initially, like just to do like
No,
those kind of studio gigs, or like to
no, it
more,
wasn't. My idea was just to like find more challenges because
yeah, okay,
um, I wasn't really that much of a composer in Dallas, just out of college,
yeah,
and I was just trying to develop as a player. And like I said, I'd kind of done as much as I could in
yeah,
that area, so I couldn't see things changing. Um, so I was going to move to LA, and without any particular plan, was just like I said, the two people I knew were on the road, which means, oh, okay,
yeah,
then you can get touring gigs, you can get gigs, get some um, connections, and and meet people. So I went there and just did whatever I could, but at the same time, my my process was I was always seeking out like creative situations.
yeah, yeah.
So I spent a lot of time jamming with people in living rooms,
Oh, yeah,
just
that's
kind
so
of
important. Yeah,
networking, just creating and doing things like that. So by word of mouth, you jam with somebody that's a good experience. They get you on a gig, and then you're with that gig, and you meet this person. They recommend you, or they want to
yeah,
jam, or whatever. And it was like just a word of mouth networking thing.
yeah. What was like the first kind of groundbreaking gig for you, like in LA? You remember, like that kind of opened even more doors, or
Yeah, I'd definitely say there's a place called the Baked Potato, right?
yeah, sure, I
You've
know. Yeah,
heard of it? Yeah, it's real
yeah,
famous. It was famous before I got there, and it was it's where all the great musicians played, casually just for fun. Um, and so I got a gig with this guitarist named Phil Upchurch.
oh yeah, he played with the Benson also, right? Rhythm guitar,
Yeah,
didn't he?
yeah,
No, yeah, he
exactly.
did. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And so that he played regularly at the Baked Potato,
Oh, wow, okay.
and so that was like some regular exposure. At the same time, it was really fun gig because he would throw down some blues, like some serious blues, and then the next tune would be Giant Steps.
Yeah, okay,
It was,
jeez,
it was like
that's
I
good.
was thrown into the fire, It was like all kinds of challenges and some really good drummers. For a while there, he had Mike Baker,
Yeah,
who was a drummer I went to school with at North Texas. And Mike Baker played a lot with Zawinul Syndicate, amazing drummer. And then another guy named Lan Richards
I don't know.
from Houston. And so I learned a lot, from playing with these great drummers and that situation. So that kind of, let me meet other people, and that would
Yeah,
be like the first thing that happened.
yeah. Like, was it then at the same time, like through Baked Potato, that you met like Scott Kinsey and Scott Henderson also, or how did that story then be? Because it's around that time also, right? Or
Actually, a
kind
little
of.
earlier. Like I moved there, and one of the people I knew was Brad Dutz,
Yeah,
who was
he was on the
from
first records, right? Yeah,
couple records of Tribal Tech.
Yeah.
And he was one of the persons I jammed a lot with.
Oh,
And so he had been jamming in Scott's band because Scott had a band. It was just his music. And actually Mike Baker was playing drums at that point. And so I went over to his house and jammed, and we started playing his music. I liked it.
yeah.
I remember because I was such a chameleon, you know, I was going everywhere playing like fretted, you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
thumb bass and fretless, you know, when I could, you know, and we broke out one of Scott's tunes and it was an E. I said, okay, so I'm okay, we probably want to do this. And it was funny because when I started doing it, like after the tune was over, he said, like, you know, you don't have to do that, you know. Yeah,
That would impress the shit out of you. Like, yeah, man. Like, doom, boom, doo, doo.
yeah. It definitely didn't belong.
But you mentioned fretless. I have to ask you this. I wanted to ask you this before, but if you know, I've did this talks interviews with so many musicians who played with Jacques also, and like when he came out, you know, and to the scene. And speaking of fretless, I mean, you have such an individual sound now, or already had it 30 years ago, you know, or when I kind of like got to know you, at least, okay, 25. But
Yeah.
as a fretless bass player, or as a bass player, I mean, it's kind of hard to escape the influence of Jacques. Like, but you seem to make it, And but how was it like for you when you first heard Jocko? And what was
Well,
your process of escaping the route of
yeah,
not sounding actually like him?
right. Okay, so when I first heard, like a friend played me Jocko's solo record, um, second year in college or something like that, and my ear and understanding of music was not developed enough to really appreciate what was going on because I was still trying to like learn how to keep the form in bebop, you know,
Yeah.
and do stupid basic things, you know. Um, so it didn't really hit me very hard, you know. Um, And then I think it must have been like a year later, I was in a band and we were playing like four tunes off of Heavy Weather. Yeah.
Yeah.
So so it became that important, you know, Weather Report, to influence what I wanted to do musically. And so I did a lot of searching. Like first thing I did when I got out of college, I was in a top 40 band and I saved up
Oh,
my
wow.
money. Um, I saved up my money and bought a 65 jazz bass,
Hmm.
um, and had it. I was in Alaska, and I had them because there was no UPS or FedEx back then. So I had them. I put it on layaway and I paid it off, and I had them put it on a bus all the way to Alaska. You know. So once I got it there, I took it to different stores and asked them like, okay, can I take the frets off and put epoxy? And they said, no, you can't do that. It's going to break. It's going to crack, you know? So I was totally on my own and I did some research. I bought some different epoxies, finishes. I
Yeah.
tested it with a coin. You know, I found this stuff that worked and put lines in it and did it myself
Oh,
and started like from there, like 2 years, I just tracked my hand up and down the neck. I didn't play fretted anymore. Um,
oh,
and yeah, it it was easy to fall into what Jocko did,
yeah,
you know. And my thing was that I think you shouldn't avoid influences. You should
sure.
kind of like go through them, you know. So I absorbed what I could as much as I could about getting tone and eventually I think I learned enough about his playing that it was easy for me to make the decision. Oh, that sounds too much like Jocko.
Yeah,
Do something, you know.
yeah,
So that's the process. That was one of the processes. The other process was that I did a lot of work learning how the instrument works,
yeah,
you know, as far as wood and pickups and pickup placement and finishing and all those things. And so in learning how to build an instrument, I kind of learned how you can maximize the design to get the sound you want. So
Characteristics, yeah, and everything.
so that led to like a really great relationship I've had with Ibanez over
Yeah.
20 more than 30 years now. So
Yeah, I see the babies back there.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, so that's another thing about sound is like at one point I got rid of the jazz bass and
Yeah.
I'd heard Jimmy Johnson on a record, and I knew he was playing an alembic, and all the alembics I played were like, but the back pickup was really close to the bridge,
Yeah.
it was real nasty sounding, and his sounded pretty warm. I thought, okay, I'm going to try this alembic direction to try to get a different tone, and went through about a year of playing that bass and could never get like a sound out of it, so then I started building my own and started learning. I mean, I started building my own pickups,
Wow.
I went to the whole thing about instrument design, and
It's
that helped me refine the tone and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
it's so funny you mentioned this because we're probably talking about 80s,
Yeah, exactly.
well,
80s.
when there was no internet, like for nowadays you can just Google or YouTube, how to make a pickup, and it's like you
Yeah.
get like 600 videos. Back then, I guess it was just like trial and error, or
Yeah, a lot of investigation. I read somewhere, I think I found out that the Fender jazz pickups were made with a specific gauge wire.
yeah,
And I made a bunch of calls and I found the supplier that would sell me a spool of it. So I went to the hardware store. I bought magnets that were used to find nails in a wall,
oh man,
because they're on this little spinning thing and they point you when you find a nail. And I bought like 8 of those and I drilled out some blank circuit board material, super glued it, and stuck it on a drill and just like
that's bizarre, man.
filled it up with wire. And I had myself a pickup, because I couldn't afford to experiment with buying things and trying
Sure.
things, but I could hack things. So
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, that's what. Yeah, that explains your sound. I mean, how
yeah, that's part of it. It's just understanding all the elements. Yeah.
the importance of the sound. I love. This is what I love, the electric bass. If you listen to it, you have, I don't know, players like you, and then on the other hand, in the jazz realm world, you have Steve Swallow, who has a completely different approach and sound, but it's both are incredible. It's so cool to see that. I mean, but if just speaking of sound and recognizability, I think I have almost all of the Tribal Tech records, and you guys achieved this original sound, which I think in the fusion world, it is kind of heavy because a lot of it sounded the same, for me at least, or musically, if you know what I mean. It was just like this stuck in time feeling many times you get. But when I hear you guys, it's like, oh man, especially those records, Face First, Reality Check, and all that stuff. Later, and the Stella intro, I think it's on Reality Check, that blew my mind. And but I wanted to ask you, like, how was your work process within that band? Because initially it was kind of like Scott's band, or did you guys form it together?
Yeah. It was pretty much. Initially it was Scott's band, Scott's music. That was the first record, and the second record I wrote 2 songs on.
Dr.
And
He,
then-
right? Yeah.
Dr. He, yeah.
Yeah.
And then after that, we started like splitting
Yeah.
kind of the writing, like half and half, mostly. So the first few, I would say, first couple of records, we didn't really have a working band.
Oh, wow.
We didn't have a consistent lineup that we could record, and so we had to like maximize what happened in the studio. And so what we did was we kind of like composed our way through these tunes, in that they were kind of big productions, and they had cool shit happening and it kept it interesting. And so the first 2 records, we'd hire people, we'd rehearse them, and we'd do these records. And then when we finally started like getting, we had this, back then it was this kind of strategy that you needed a calling card to get gigs and
Yeah.
festivals. And back
Yeah.
then, a calling card was an LP,
Yeah.
vinyl, not even CD. It was
Oh
vinyl.
shit! Yeah, of course.
The first two were vinyl, and so if you had vinyl, you could send it to somebody, and you were legit, you
Yeah.
know. So once we started playing this music live, we realized how much of a straitjacket it was. It felt almost as restrictive as a top 40 gig because there were all
Yeah.
these events and sections and stuff like that. And so we really had to like rethink our compositional process because basically we were standing behind the music and we wanted to change that so that we, as our personalities as improvisers and players, would come out.
Yeah.
And so we started really paring down how much we wrote and started emphasizing how we played together and what we could say on the instruments.
Yeah.
But
you mentioned like the composing now. I mean, I know you wrote like Canine and the Precipice. I love that tune. That's my favorite tune you wrote. Like it starts off nothing, like da-da, and then again, like how was your process of writing for that band? Or I mean, I know when I listen to your records, your solo records, like some of are like based probably on jamming, but some are like really through composed stuff, like this tribal tech stuff. Some of it, at least, I hear. But what was your process of writing there, like for that group, for instance?
Well, the interesting thing is that Scott and I we agreed to become co-leaders of the band, but we didn't write together.
Oh, okay.
Like what we would do is that we would check with each other. We were on the phone a lot, checking with each other and make sure that, like, we had an album coming up, we'd make sure that we're not writing the same tune.
Okay.
We'd show each other demos of the direction we were going, and we would and at the same time we would bounce ideas off of each other. He would play me stuff he was working on. I would make suggestions. I would play him stuff, and he would make suggestions.
Wow.
So we were very much in isolation, writing what we wrote, although it was like in the same direction.
Yeah. Because it's a unity. Yeah, you listen to the records, and even it's you two guys kind of having tunes. It's basically sounds so together. But
it's kind of weird that like Henderson is the blues rocker.
Yeah.
But like a big portion of the heavy rock stuff I wrote.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's like we had this mix of
But were you aware, like when you composed for that band, that you had like Henderson on guitar, like his style of playing, when you were writing heads or whatever, that he would be playing them, or you probably did. I mean, right?
No, like I got myself into trouble early because in the 80s was the explosion of like MIDI.
Yeah.
And the ability to add instruments and percussion and things like that. And so I would work like fucking hard to get my demos to sound like really, really good, And I take these demos and then we try to play them as a band, and it would like the band like just sounded empty and lifeless, And it would piss me off so much because Henderson would make like the shittiest sounding demos, just like the stupid. He wouldn't work on sound design. He wouldn't work on drum programming. He wouldn't work on anything. And he would come up with these tunes, and the demo was like, ugh, and then we'd play them, and it was like killing, And so it was kind of frustrating. But that was my process. Eventually, I forced myself to like limit myself to a melody sound, a chord sound, drums, and bass, and ended up writing things like K9 or things.
How did you write Canine, by the way? I mean, because like it's on bass, like started jamming, or because it's like this groove, like, or this type of tunes. I mean,
I don't know. It's like sometimes you really open up creativity with limitations. Like that one, I just gave myself the requirements of writing a tune that's based on linear.
Yeah.
And not chords, because I'd been writing so many fucking chords, we would joke, that my tune won, a ribbon at the state fair because it had the most chords in it. Um,
Oh, man.
so like I literally just gave myself the restriction. Okay, just two lines, just a linear tune.
Yeah. And you
So
wrote by hand back then? Because now we
oh
have Sibelius and stuff like that, but
hell no. I've never prior to 84, 85.
yeah.
Maybe I wrote stuff by hand, but as soon as the Mac came out
Oh, yeah.
and had
Shit, yeah.
sequencing, and even before that, the two songs I wrote for Dr. He,
Mhm.
I wrote on a Casio CZ5000,
Oh, man. Okay.
and it had a little 8-track sequencer that had like a 90s phone 2-line display on it, and so
Man.
you could create by entering stepwise notes, because I didn't really have playing chops, but I could enter notes.
Yeah.
And so, and the other thing is that if you wanted to change a note and then hear how it happened, you had to play it from the beginning every fucking time. So
Oh, man.
I rigged up a little plastic like holder that I could stick something under. It would hold down the fast forward key so that I could just pull it out when I wanted to hear what I just
One
changed,
section. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, my whole process has been, with sequencing and the computer.
Yeah. Makes it easier. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was it with?
Well, I mean, it makes it easier, but what it does is it gives you kind of immediate access to your
Yeah.
imagination, you
Yeah.
know? And part of the reason for that also was that living in LA, it's all about car culture. You can hardly call any part of LA the center,
Yeah.
It's just sprawling 3-hour drive from one end to the other, So to do a rehearsal for Treble Tech, you know, 4 to 6 people had to get in their cars, pack equipment, drive for an hour, hour and a half through traffic, set up. You couldn't deliver a piece of paper and have it fail, you
Yeah.
know.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you had to have tested this stuff with
Efficiency.
demos and stuff like that, to make it worth everybody's while.
Yeah.
So
So
that
bizarre.
that
Man.
yeah, that brought the importance of demos and composition that way, you
Yeah.
know.
So funny because now it's so easy. You send someone a wave and that's it or whatever. You can do a record already at home
Yeah, yeah,
without
yeah,
musicians almost.
yeah.
But back then, yeah, it's like when you say that. I remember I had a Spectrum. The first computers, ZX Spectrum, like, and
Wow.
I still remember I played games on it like as a kid, and I was so excited that one figure was running and then like the end of the screen and it like glitched and like but now if you see the games or the industry, it's like, man, it's like
It's
movies, but
it's like, yeah, but isn't it it's bigger than music and TV combined?
yeah, yeah, like all
It's
these consoles like PlayStation and Xbox or
yeah,
whatever. Yeah, it's incredible.
it's
It's
huge.
incredible. I wanted to catch you here also for Tribal Tech, asking you this, like, because you mentioned festivals and gigs, and I mean, I know you guys probably did like tons of gigging, but when was it the first time you guys went to Europe? Do you remember that? Was it still in the 80s? And how was the reaction of you guys and actually the audience?
Well, it was not the important thing was like it's kind of strange how the first gig happened. Let's see. Scott was playing with Zawinul,
Hmm.
and at that summer there was like the North Sea Festival.
Yeah, sure.
So there was like a competitor to the North Sea Festival that was going on, and so Henderson was playing with Zawinul at that festival, and that festival like had a cancellation, and they had an open slot,
Ah,
and
okay.
so they asked
Funny.
Scott if his band could do it, and so I got a call, said, "Hey, get the guys together, let's fly," you know, and I was so like naive or whatever, stupid, whatever. I looked at it was actually it was John Beasley and Joey Heredia in the
Okay.
band,
Yeah, I know John Beasley. Yeah.
and I had the tickets, and it said 20:30, in European time, and I'd only been to Europe a couple of times. I was not familiar with it, and I thought it was like 10:30, you know. And so I said, everybody be there, at 8:30 just to be, an hour before or whatever. And
Yeah.
we were there. The flight had already gone, and shit, man. So I had to. There was like this is '80s, there was not
Yeah.
really email and shit like that. So I had to like call around, ask around, found a way to get us there through Ireland somehow, and had to pay for more flights myself. And we got there. We had to spend like a few hours at a hotel on a layover, and we finally got there. It was an ordeal. And I think we ended up opening up for Mike Stern.
Oh wow.
And lucky for us, there was a agent, Patrizio Chiozza.
Oh yeah, I know him. Yeah, from Italy. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and he was there, and he saw us, and he dug us. And
That's how you hooked up with him. Okay, that's
that
quite
was the
cool.
main thing. I don't remember the audience or anything like that,
Yeah.
but the fact that he liked what we did and gave us the opportunity to go over there again later, kind of opened up that door for us.
Yeah.
So
Did, did,
that's and then the other thing is because of all the delays and I had to buy extra flights or something like that. We the 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 festival directors, got us in a room, and he wasn't going to pay us, the full amount, and we were like, "Rah, rah, rah," and then he brings in this big guy, almost like an enforcer, and and we couldn't argue anymore. We were just okay. We tucked our heads and like, okay, whatever. Okay, we'll take whatever you give us,
oh man.
It was a total, stupid mistake for me and a money losing situation, but it turned out really well,
Well,
that we can
yeah.
get back over.
Did
So
you like touring later? Like, I mean, you guys probably toured a lot, and like when I started with jazz, I had this, idea, kind of like a romantic idea when you start, hearing you guys or Pat Metheny or, and then you see how, wow, it's so much, it must be amazing on touring. And then you do your first tour, and it's like, fuck, man, I have to call the promoter, I have to, take care of the guys. When is dinner? When is sound check? I mean, the playing is that's the least worry.
yeah,
How was
basically yeah, like because of the kind of music we played and the small audience for it,
yeah,
it didn't allow for the level of touring that leads to an acceptable lifestyle. It's like when we had to learn a lot. Like the first the first tour we did of the U.S. Henderson and I put our money together and bought this van, and we bought a van with no windows
oh
so that
man,
we piled up equipment in the back, and nobody could see that it was full of equipment. And we did this first tour, and we got booked like, through the East Coast and stuff like that. And by the middle of the tour, so many gigs had been canceled that we had to like just fucking cancel and come home,
oh
you
man,
know? So Henderson and I, like the keyboard player, Kinsey flew home. Kirk promised to help us drive, and then about a half day in, he bailed and said, "I'm out of here." And so me and Henderson drove like 3 days straight from like Baltimore to L.A.,
oh
losing
man.
money the whole time. It
Sure.
was a nightmare. So that was our first tour experience.
Talking
It
about
was
romantic, right?
Yeah, and so it was challenging. I mean, like when we later tours, we at first we thought, okay, we'll have a sound person and somebody to help with gear. So we were in the van and we were going to use my personal car, and we started out with like 6 people, and we had to bail on that like
Yeah, yeah,
immediately. So
sure.
it just became 4 guys in a van, and we would be calling, try to coordinate with the engineer at whatever club to get the sound check and make sure the hotels are reserved, doing all this,
Yeah,
stuff that, you'd think would be taken care of. No, we had to do it all. So, and it was funny, in talking to Gergo, uh, he started playing when he was 3, and he was like, a professional at a
yeah,
very young age. and by the time he was 15, he had his own personal drum tech, you know? I mean, that's just how, and so it's so weird. He would tell me he would come to see us in Vienna, and he couldn't believe he would see me and Kinsey and Henderson and Kirk like just schlepping gear up and down the stairs, and he was like, holy, he couldn't fucking believe it, you know? But that was our life, you know.
Yeah,
We were a
it's
moving
funny.
company, a moving
Yeah,
company, except for 2 hours out of the night.
yeah. It's like I don't know who said it. One jazz musician, you're basically paid to travel.
Yeah, basically, yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean the amount you play, it's amazing, but before that, it's so much hassle and all that, and it's just like you got to keep
yeah,
a smile in a way on your face because fans come and they support the music, and you're tired, but still like oh, okay, sure,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it's
But that
amazing.
that was we were young and and we didn't know we did know there were other ways to tour, but we
Yeah,
never could break into that level of success because we wanted to play our music, you know. And
yeah,
we were lucky that we didn't have record companies
yeah,
forcing us into a direction, you know.
yeah. Yeah. But I wanted to ask you this: like during the tribal tech era, you already started. You did No Sweat then at
Mhm.
'96, right? Which was your debut as a leader, or even earlier?
Mhm.
No,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, 98, I think, maybe.
'98.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
when did you decide to become a band leader? Actually, when was that moment that after co-leading this band with Scott, was it like, okay,
Well,
I want to do my own record?
um, I think it's just kind of like I was kind of going in that direction in that like I think it was Reality Check.
Hmm.
I'd written a song that didn't have guitar in it, you know. And so it and um and I'd done some other, I've always done other compositions, and
Yeah.
some of them were good for Treble Tech, some of them were not. And it was just a matter of opportunity. I met um, John Durant, who was starting a label called Alchemy,
Hmm.
and his idea, it was like too early for its time, but his idea was just to be streaming, just to stream the content, skip this whole
Yeah.
middleman,
Yeah.
uh, intermediary distributors and thing. And that back then the internet just didn't support it. There was
Yeah.
not enough bandwidth for his idea to work. It was a great idea. But he gave me the opportunity and said, I'm starting this record company. I've done a couple. Let's see what we can do. And I told him who I wanted to have on it, and and
How
that's
did
that's how
you
I started this opportunity.
how did you hook up with those guys? I mean, it's Steve and Dennis. I mean, Scott. Okay, it's
Well, I'd played in different bands in LA with Steve Tavaglione,
oh,
and
okay.
all kinds of things before I met Scott. Um, and I'd met Dennis on various, like that first gig we opened up for
Oh, Stern.
Stern's
Oh yeah,
band. Yeah,
sure. He was. Yeah.
I met him like various times, through touring and stuff like that. Um, and he had mentioned Bob Berg,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
for the
Mhm.
second record, but for the first one. It was just through knowing Dennis and talking with him, and we were able to rehearse maybe like 4 hours before we started recording the next day.
Yeah.
So, and
That's amazing.
everybody on the record just was killing it. So
Yeah.
I was lucky.
Yeah. Also, Bent, you mentioned Bob Burke. I'm such a huge fan of Bob. I mean,
Yeah,
how was he like as a player? I mean, like, as a person and as a player. I mean, he's one of those really almost underrated players in the history of jazz because
yeah. It was like because him and Dennis kind of they've had a history together.
yeah,
So again, like this is kind of one of the things that turned me off about being a band leader is that I didn't really get to hang as much because I had to like
yeah, exactly.
you know, take care of shit and take care of logistics and all the stuff. So, but it was amazing hearing him play every night. It was like
Yeah.
incredible. You know?
Did you ever bring that unit then to Europe also as a band leader?
No,
Or?
I tried, but Patrizio couldn't put it together. I mean,
Mm,
it's just my name didn't carry enough,
funny.
weight.
Wow, amazing, interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I also wanted to. I kind of you kind of revealed it already, but like, do you feel comfortable in a role of a band leader? I mean, comfortable. Stupid question, but do you like it in a way compared to
Well, the
like?
thing is, of course, I have, you know, I have very strong ideas about what I'd like to happen, when playing music. So I have no trouble, in inflicting my opinions on people,
Yeah, okay.
as a band leader, or my students know that I have no trouble inflicting my opinions on them.
That's good
Um,
actually.
but the other side of it, the managing side, the record label side, the agents, the
Yeah,
touring, the all the other stuff that comes with it, it's like, I don't want to be an administrator. And the other thing is, it's just kind of it's made this transition to what I'm doing now pretty like easier. Is that early on I kind of had to develop this in order to survive musically. Like we're all our own worst critics. Like and so like for me, I had to develop this philosophy that like once the downbeat starts, I can't care what happens.
mm,
You just have to let things go and have fun,
mm,
and
yeah,
hope for the best, and not let yourself get too depressed, if your impression of things is that it's not so good.
yeah,
Uh, because so many things can affect your interpretation of what's happening in the moment, you know. Um, the sound could be great, but then you listen to it outside, on
yeah,
a mix, and it's horrible mix. The playing could be great. You think it's great, and you listen to the results, and it's, oh shit, that's horrible playing. Or you have a good vibe. You're with the band. You feel like it's cool, but the audience is like sitting on their hands and in the dark, and you can't see them
yeah,
react. And
yeah,
then afterwards, they tell you it's like the most amazing thing they've seen, and you're like, you feel like, really, that happened? Other times, the audience is like going nuts, asking for three encores, and you listen back to it, and it's like, oh, that's kind of, like there's so many fucking variables, is that you can't really trust your in the moment.
yeah. True.
And the other thing is when good things happen, when there was a good experience the whole time. If you try to possess that, if you try to embrace that and take it with you and expect it of the next gig too much, then you're going to start corrupting your musical decisions
Yeah,
and
yeah,
try to do the thing that worked last time.
yeah. I did that too many times. Man.
Yeah, and
Didn't
so
work.
yeah, so you can't let previous experience cloud your judgment on the next one. So I had, like I said, I had just have you try like hell to prepare as much as you can to be as ready as possible, and then you have to turn it off and not care.
Yeah, it's quite heavy.
So so I didn't fall in love with my relationship to the audience. I couldn't let myself do it.
Yeah,
Just like it was too fickle, it was too unpredictable.
yeah,
So um, there is this I suppose it exists, this relationship with the audience and playing, and that feeling of acceptance, or that feeling of communicating what you want, musically. Um, but I just didn't let myself get addicted to that. And so for that reason, I kind of stopped pushing to try to get myself out there,
yeah.
you know.
Hmm. Interesting.
Um,
Yeah,
that's one reason. The other thing is that it's like I said, the kind of music that I like to play doesn't lead to an acceptable lifestyle touring.
yeah, sure.
It's
It's
just inhuman,
no, no, it does make sense. Yeah, sure. That's exactly.
traveling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
too much hassle to if you compare the quality. It's like you live in Barcelona now, and you talk to so many musicians, let's say in New York or wherever, and sometimes I bring musicians to Europe for a tour or whatever, and then they're always like really shocked at the quality of living, let's say here in Slovenia or even Barcelona, because it's good. It's if you can teach and do stuff what you want, it's actually you can live better here for really less money than to live like that in New York, for instance. So I think these things are important, I guess.
Yeah.
But Gary, not to take too much of your time, I just wanted to ask you two things, because one is, since I'm being a guitar player, you probably know this question is gonna come, but like you're on 2 records by Alan Holdsworth, and he was, like, for me, the hero. Still is one of the most unique musicians to occur on electric guitar. And I wanted to ask you, how did the collaboration with him begin, and how was it like playing with him musically? Like, how did those records happen? Did you guys rehearse a lot, or what was the process?
Let's see. The first process was, the first time I met him was Henderson knew him, and he was looking for I was a sub for Jimmy Johnson on a tour.
Wow. Okay.
And since they were going to tour, he decided, okay, let's go in the studio as well. And so I played on one tune, which was like half a record or something like that. So basically, yeah, I was a sub. We toured around the U.S., and it was kind of weird because at that point the band, he still had the singer John Williams.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there was like some friction between those two that was, it made the long days driving kind of uncomfortable,
Oh yeah, okay.
So it was kind of a weird situation to be put into. It was kind of frustrating because he's a complicated person when it comes to his playing. You can't like give him a compliment. He will drag you through the mud like you're an idiot if you think he played well.
Seriously? Oh wow.
Yeah, he's like, oh, that sucked. I was horrible. There's no acknowledging that you thought it was better or worse than any other thing. So that part was kind of frustrating. But like the super nicest guy you've ever met. Like a super nice human being. It was another kind of weird situation was making the jazz record with him.
Yeah.
With Kirk. We got down there, and Gordon Beck, the keyboard player, was an acoustic pianist, and a great one. But he was having to deal with a controller, which he hadn't done before. So that he was a little out of his element there. The other thing was that Holdsworth, I suppose most of his projects, he knew he was going to probably record everything again. So on this record, he didn't even bother.
Oh, wow.
He didn't track one note. So we would rehearse the songs and say, okay, guitar solo here, and Kirk and I would play and hope, kind of like there was a solo section, and so.
Wow, interesting.
That's how it happened, and he added everything later.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Man. But and when you played the bass solo, you also played it only with Kirk, like very early on the Bill Evans tune, like that.
Yeah.
Only you and Kirk. Wow.
Yeah.
Man, I didn't know that, because I love his playing on that record. You don't hear him playing standards many times, but Countdown he plays. It's like, man, the lines he plays is just like
phenomenal. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, I didn't know that. That's quite cool.
So in having the opportunity to do it over the years, there's an art to recording a solo, to the events in a rhythm section. Yeah. You can make it like so ungodly amazing that how did that happen, and you can blow people's minds when it didn't happen, or you can make it as if it happened in real time, where you play a rhythm and the rhythm section reacts to it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's
Yeah.
what Alan did. He would certain times he would suggest a rhythm, and then you would hear it in the rhythm section. So that's how we would react.
Because he heard, yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah. So I've had situations where I've had to do that, or Henderson's had to do that to our rhythm section playing and things like that. And so there's an art to
Yeah,
having access to enough and understanding vocabulary enough to compose or record a solo
yeah,
to
definitely.
existing tracks. So
Yeah, but I mean, nowadays that's easy, to do because of technology, but still we're talking about 96. So must have been harder to do for him also. Like, I don't know.
yeah, the technology back then, I think he might have been still using tape.
Wow. Wow.
So, yeah, I think he still might have been
That's
using
amazing.
tape, maybe digital tape, um,
That's amazing.
but yeah, it was harder. But like from the beginning, like my philosophy was, I from the beginning, I never knew if this was going to be my last recording opportunity, and I had a sense that okay, this is permanent, like this is going to be forever,
Yeah,
so I would take advantage of whatever technology was available to make it so that I could stand listening to it
sure.
sometime in the future, and
Yeah.
so if that meant overdubbing, if that meant computer, whatever, it's like, and you still have to have an imagination for what can happen musically. It doesn't magically make you a great soloist.
Yeah,
You have to
no,
have
definitely.
concept for ideas and imagination and how ideas put together. So,
Yeah, I
so
saw that you use this a lot. Like I saw a lot of footage of your, the trio with Liberty and
yeah,
other stuff where you use like laptops and all the.
yeah,
You always seem to use technology throughout your career. Like you said, 85, you did pickups and stuff, and yeah,
yeah,
um,
yeah. Like I'm a hacker
that's
at heart.
beautiful. Gary, I just wanted to ask you also this one. I mean, just speaking of visionary minds, like your collaboration with Wayne Shorter, uh,
Hmm.
like the Phantom Navigator. He's one of the best composers, probably beside players, also improvisers. But how did the story with Wayne happen?
Well, you can sort of trace the my becoming like like getting myself on the map in LA playing at the Baked Potato.
Yeah.
Um, I think like Wayne recorded with I forgot the bass player's name. Um,
Alfonso? No, Johnson? No.
no, his Atlantis.
Oh, shit.
The bass player escapes me, but he
Yeah.
was kind of a studio guy. Um, Larry, no, Klein? No, might have been Larry Klein.
Larry Klein? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And but he was a studio entrenched in studio work. He wasn't going to go out and tour. Wayne had a tour. His management suggested the Yellow Jackets, but they
Wow.
and so it was going to be the Yellow Jackets and Wayne. But they were busy and there were too many conflicts. And Wayne had these gigs lined up. So somebody in the Yellow Jackets recommended me, I guess. I don't know
Yeah.
for sure. Um, and so it's weird. Like the first audition rehearsal at Wayne's was all of us sitting down at a table, and he played a recording of Nikolai Tesla talking.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's bizarre.
It's like, really? So his brain, his imagination lives in the abstract world of ideas and things like that. So once you understand that, then it's easy to understand how he plays and how he composes and
Yeah. Yeah.
the playful and experimental nature of his creativity. It's like amazing, you know. But to talk to him about mundane day-to-day life things, like he has no interest.
How funny.
He'll talk your ear off about 1940s black and white film noir.
Yeah.
He's like
Incredible.
an encyclopedia. So
But you guys, you toured then with him, actually, with Wayne?
yeah,
Oh, I
yeah.
didn't know that.
Oh yeah,
That's-
yeah.
I
I
thought you
toured.
just did the record. Okay, cool.
No. I toured with Wayne for about a year and a half.
Really? Oh wow.
Yeah.
How was that
So
like from gig to gig, like playing
it
with
was
him?
it was fucking amazing. I mean, obviously, like it was like a dream come true. Obviously, you
Yeah.
get the call, we're going to Japan. Then he started talking about the Japanese people and like, okay, just what do I have to learn? What's the music?
Yeah.
Uh, and so I had like the best seat in the house.
Oh yeah.
And as
Sure.
like I like the thing is that he he had this long history of already that I knew about in music. As a band leader on records and with Weather Report.
Yeah.
But I think he was like really pretty new to band leading, on stage. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I've done it before, but like the first tune that we played, like we had to start it twice. Because
That's so funny.
count it off, and the count off was like the wrong tempo, whatever. So, and then like we got like maybe a week into the tour, and we realized that the shows were like really short.
Uh-huh.
But
Wow.
we were playing music from Atlantis, and there
Yeah.
were no solos. So we had to sit down and dissect all the tunes and say, okay, we can put a solo here. Here's where we can put a solo here, piano solo here. We had to go through the music and insert solos,
Wow. Amazing.
and then once that happened, the music opened up, and the coolest thing was we'd have these sound check jams,
Mm.
and that stuff was like so fun, so cool, where
Yeah.
there was one time where we did a tour with Chicory's Electric Band, and so we would always play before Chick, which means we would sound check last or something like that.
Yeah.
And we were doing one of our jam things, and we finished, and like Chick came up to me, he's like, what was that you guys just did? Which was like the highest compliment you could
That's beautiful.
ever get.
Did you ever play with Chick, by the way? I mean, since you mentioned
No,
him.
never did. No.
Hmm. Funny. Yeah, it would be so cool to record those jam sessions. Like,
Yeah.
like I've spoken to, I don't know, Jerry Berganzi or Dave Liebman, and they tell me like in New York, the 70s, they had the lofts. And,
Yeah.
and there was like, and then like I was there and Steve Grossman and, Mike Brecker came and there was Schofield on guitar and I don't know, Steve Gadd played drums. And I was like, man, I wish someone had an iPhone and just pressed record to have that. And we played like 6 hours, like
Yeah.
bizarre. Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing.